In a sport defined by broken noses, cauliflower ears, and shattered orbitals, she looks like she walked straight off a Hollywood red carpet and accidentally stepped into a steel cage. Covered in intricate, vibrant tattoos, boasting a surgically enhanced runway-ready physique, and holding a massive, highly curated presence on platforms like Instagram and OnlyFans, she is the absolute embodiment of the modern internet influencer. But beneath the perfect makeup, the viral bikini posts, and the glamorous million-dollar aesthetic beats the heart of an absolute savage. Pearl Gonzalez isn't just a pretty face looking for social media clout. She is a gritty, aggressive brawler who walked away from the sterile lights of traditional arenas to literally bare her knuckles and bleed for a paycheck in the most unforgiving combat sport on the planet. The internet tried to label her a bimbo, a gimmick, an Instagram model playing fighter. They looked at her surgically enhanced figure and assumed she would shatter the second a real punch landed on her jaw. But to understand the sheer violence she is capable of and the absolute disrespect she showed to everyone who doubted her, you have to look past the flashing cameras and travel to the unforgiving streets where her terrifying right hand was originally forged. Her story doesn't begin in a high-end, air-conditioned California fitness center with celebrity trainers and designer water bottles. It starts in the freezing concrete trenches of Chicago, Illinois. Born in August 1986, Pearl Gonzalez was raised in neighborhoods where survival was the only currency that mattered. Surrounded by gang violence, crushing poverty, and a broken system, the odds of a young girl making it out without being swallowed by the streets were statistically non-existent. Her parents separated when she was young, and her father, seeking a desperate way to keep his daughter away from the gangs and the drugs that were claiming the lives of her peers, dragged an 11-year-old Pearl into a grimy, sweat-stained combat gym. While other girls her age were watching cartoons, playing with makeup, or worrying about middle school drama, Pearl was wrapping her hands in cheap cotton, hitting heavy bags duct taped together, and sparring with boys twice her size. She found her absolute sanctuary in the violence. She started in pankration, an ancient, brutal mix of boxing and wrestling, before transitioning to amateur Golden Gloves boxing. By the time she was a teenager, the girl they would eventually call the Chi-Town Princess was already dropping opponents with heavy hooks and learning how to take a bare-knuckle punch to the jaw without blinking. She was fighting in underground smokers, learning the grim reality of combat long before the glamour and the cameras ever arrived. But the path to glory was paved with deep, agonizing setbacks. At 21 years old, she became a mother, stepping away from the violence of the gym to raise her child. She took odd jobs, working as an extra in commercials, doing modeling gigs, and struggling as an ambassador for various brands just to put food on the table. She was hustling in the real world, trying to balance the responsibilities of motherhood with the burning primal urge to fight that never left her blood. The desire to impose her will on another human being clawed at her every single day. She returned to the mats, fully transitioning to mixed martial arts. She didn't want to just box anymore. She wanted to learn how to break limbs, how to defend takedowns, and how to choke opponents entirely unconscious. After a brief amateur career where she tested her evolving skills, she turned professional in 2012. She lost her debut, a bitter pill to swallow, but instead of folding and retreating back to the safety of modeling, she went on an absolute tear. She captured the XFC Women's Strawweight Championship, submitting Courtney Casey with a brutal armbar in the third round.
Behind her! Can she find it? Yes, she can! Pearl Gonzalez wins the crown!
She developed a terrifying grappling game, a smothering top pressure that forced opponents to simply give up their necks or their arms because they couldn't breathe under her weight. She rattled off 6 consecutive professional victories, catching the attention of the ultimate proving ground, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. In April 2017, the glamorous brawler was called up to the big leagues to make her highly anticipated debut at UFC 210 in Buffalo, New York, against the highly touted, undefeated prospect, Cynthia Calvillo. This was supposed to be the glorious climax of her gritty Cinderella story. She had fought her way out of the Chicago slums and onto the biggest stage in martial arts. But before she even threw a single punch, Pearl Gonzalez became the center of one of the most absurd, viral controversies in the entire history of mixed martial arts. After successfully stepping on the scale and making weight, completely drained and dehydrated from the brutal weight cut, Pearl was suddenly pulled aside by the New York State Athletic Commission. In a completely unprecedented move, the commission officials informed her that she was medically suspended and pulled from the fight immediately. The reason? They had just discovered she had breast implants. Citing an obscure, archaic rule regarding cosmetic surgery in combat sports, the commission told a girl who had fought her whole life that she couldn't fight because she looked too much like a model. The MMA media erupted instantly. It was a massive, humiliating circus. Suddenly, her name was everywhere, trending worldwide, but for all the wrong reasons. The internet labeled her a surgically enhanced gimmick who had no business being in the UFC. After hours of frantic appeals, medical reviews, and massive public outrage from fans and fellow fighters alike, the commission finally reversed their decision and cleared her to fight. But the psychological damage was completely done. When she finally walked to the octagon the next night, she was emotionally exhausted, fighting not just a world-class grappler in Calvillo, but the weight of the entire world's judgment. She fought with sheer grit, biting down on her mouthpiece and throwing heavy leather in the first 2 rounds, showcasing that classic Chicago Golden Gloves boxing pedigree. She threw stiff jabs and looping overhands, trying to knock Calvillo's head off. But in the 3rd round, the sheer exhaustion, the chaotic weight cut, and the emotional roller coaster caught up to her. Calvillo secured a slick takedown, transitioned beautifully to the back, and locked in a deep, suffocating rear naked choke. Pearl was forced to tap. It was a devastating loss on the biggest stage imaginable. 6 months later, absolutely desperate to prove she belonged in the UFC, she fought Poliana Botelho at UFC 216 in Las Vegas. Pearl knew she had to win. It turned into a grueling, grinding clinch battle against the steel chain link fence. Pearl constantly pushed the relentless pace, digging for double-leg takedowns, absorbing heavy slicing elbows to the side of her head, and refusing to take a single backward step. She smothered Botelho, trying to drag her to the canvas where she could work her devastating jiu-jitsu. But the judges favored the striking damage of Botelho and gave her the unanimous decision nod. Following back-to-back losses, the UFC ruthlessly cut Pearl Gonzalez from the roster. The critics laughed out loud. The comment sections across Instagram and YouTube were absolutely flooded with hatred and vitriol. They told her to stick to modeling. They told her to open an account and leave the real fighting to the real athletes who didn't care about their fingernails. They looked at her extensive tattoos, her perfect makeup, and her glamorous photo shoots and decided she was utterly soft, a tourist in a world of killers. But they fundamentally misunderstood the absolute iron DNA of the Chi-Town princess. Pearl Gonzalez didn't shatter into pieces. She simply reinvented her violence and prepared for a massive resurgence. She signed with Invicta Fighting Championships, the premier all-female MMA promotion in the world, known for housing the absolute toughest women outside the UFC. And she didn't just show up to cash a quick check and take advantage of her newfound viral fame. She showed up to remind everyone that she was a cold-blooded killer. In her Invicta debut against Kaylee Robbins, Pearl stalked forward right from the opening bell like a Terminator. She completely ignored Robbins' striking attempts, closed the distance with terrifying speed, and dragged her violently to the canvas. She smothered her, passing her guard with incredible ease, and unleashed a barrage of heavy, thudding ground and pound. When Robbins gave up her back in a desperate, frantic attempt to escape the concussive strikes, Pearl immediately locked her arms right under the chin, squeezing the rear naked choke with terrifying intent until the referee had to physically pry her off the unconscious body. It was a flawless, terrifying victory. Then came Diane Firmino. Pearl stood right in the center of the cage, slipping punches like a seasoned veteran and landing beautiful, crisp boxing combinations before once again taking the fight to the floor. She dominated absolutely every single grappling exchange, pouring on the damage and cruising to a dominant, unanimous decision. She proved her grappling wasn't just a fluke, it was a deeply refined, highly dangerous weapon. She even fought for the Invicta World Championship, and though she fell short against the legendary Brazilian veteran Vanessa Porto, Pearl proved she was absolutely elite. She absorbed horrifying damage, having her eye swollen completely shut from a barrage of punches, but she refused to ever quit on the stool, marching forward blindly to finish the fight on her feet. But despite earning the respect of the hardcore MMA fanbase, Pearl realized a dark truth about the combat sports industry. The pay was absolutely terrible. While she was bleeding in the cage for a few $1,000s, promoters were making millions. So, she made a brilliant pivot. She decided to completely weaponize the hatred and the internet trolls. She leaned heavily into her aesthetic, launching an OnlyFans account and taking full control of her premium content. She utilized her striking looks, her tattoos, and her surgically enhanced figure not as a distraction, but as a brilliant, highly calculated business move. While other fighters were literally begging promoters for an extra few $1,000s just to pay for their training camps and medical bills, Pearl was generating life-changing, generational wealth entirely independently. She beat the corrupt, exploitative combat sports system completely at its own game. She bought a massive house, completely secured her family's financial future, and paid back the father who had dragged her into that sweaty Chicago gym all those decades ago. She funded elite training camps for herself, hired the absolute best nutritionists in the country, and fought exactly when and where she wanted to, answering to absolutely nobody but herself. She had built an empire on the very looks that people said would ruin her career. But the truest test of her psychotic toughness, the moment she permanently silenced every single internet troll who still dared to call her an Instagram model, came in 2021. With millions in the bank, Pearl Gonzalez made a decision that shocked the entire combat sports landscape to its absolute core. She walked away from the 4-ounce gloves of mixed martial arts and signed a lucrative, highly publicized contract with the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. BKFC is not for the faint of heart. It is a completely different universe of pain. There is no grappling to hide behind when you get tired. There are no gloves to soften the blow or protect your hands. It is raw, primal, bare bone colliding with human flesh and facial tissue at high speeds. It is a sport where massive gashes open up in the first 10 seconds, where faces are permanently disfigured, where hands shatter into dust, and where only the most absolute, unhinged savages survive. For a woman making millions of dollars selling her glamorous image and beautiful face online, voluntarily stepping into a bare-knuckle ring seemed like absolute, undeniable insanity. Why risk destroying the very face that was paying her bills? But Pearl didn't care about the money anymore. Pearl wanted the blood. She made her highly anticipated bare-knuckle debut against Carissa Sigala, another fighter known for her massive social media presence and attractive aesthetic. The bell rang, and Pearl completely abandoned the beautiful curated influencer aesthetic in a fraction of a second. She bit down on her mouthpiece, stepped directly into the pocket, and started throwing absolute bombs. You could hear the sickening wet thud of raw skin on bone echoing through the arena with every single connection. Pearl's Chicago boxing pedigree shone through brilliantly under the bright lights. She pumped a stiff, piston-like jab, snapping Sigala's head back violently time and time again. She ripped vicious, liver-quivering hooks to the body, digging her bare knuckles deep into her opponent's ribs. By the second round, Sigala's face was a completely bruised, bloody, swollen mess, but Pearl was actually smiling. She was entirely in her element, completely unbothered by the sheer brutality of the affair. She battered Sigala relentlessly for all 5 rounds, cruising to a wildly dominant, unanimous decision victory and proving to the entire world that her bare fists were just as heavy, if not heavier, than her towering reputation. But the ultimate boss fight, the most horrifyingly violent night of her entire life, came when she faced the undisputed, terrifying queen of bare-knuckle boxing, Britain Hart, in Miami, Florida. Hart was a battle-tested, iron-jawed veteran, a fighter who had literally built her entire career and legacy on breaking people's faces with her raw hands. Everyone expected the former UFC model to finally fold, to finally quit on the stool when she tasted real, deep, terrifying water against a true bare-knuckle specialist. When the fight started, it was an absolute, chaotic firefight right in the center of the ring. Hart immediately rushed forward, throwing looping bare-knuckle haymakers with terrifying speed. Pearl didn't retreat a single inch. She stood her absolute ground in the center of the squared circle, planted her feet, and returned fire. The two women traded horrifying concussive shots. Within the first 2 minutes of the opening round, a heavy, devastating left hook from Hart caught Pearl flush on the jaw.
Getting a lot more aggressiveness from her, actually.
Left hand lands for Britton Hart.
Blood immediately began to trickle heavily from Pearl's mouth, staining her teeth red. But instead of backing away, Pearl just smiled a bloody, psychotic grin, wiped the blood away with her bare forearm, and fired back with a devastating straight right hand that snapped Hart's head back violently. By the third round, the fight had devolved into an absolute, unadulterated bloodbath. Hart's striking volume was incredibly high, landing sharp, stinging combinations that began to heavily swell Pearl's eyes shut. The glamorous, perfectly symmetrical model face that adorned hundreds of thousands of viral Instagram posts was being systematically dismantled and battered in real time. But Pearl Gonzalez simply refused to take a single backward step. She clinched up, grabbing the back of Hart's neck with one hand, and launched vicious, dirty boxing uppercuts right inside the pocket. She ate 3 massive punches just to land one heavy, crushing blow of her own. The crowd in the Miami arena was absolutely deafening, roaring in pure shock and awe as they watched the heavily tattooed millionaire influencer walk straight through absolute hellfire. In the fourth round, Hart landed a sickening, slicing combination that opened a massive, gushing cut right above Pearl's eye.
They're not seeing the punches you're getting hit with. Like, I don't like this. This isn't what I wanted.
Closing seconds, round number 4. Gonzalez off the right hand.
Dark red blood poured down the side of her face instantly, blinding her in one eye, staining her chest and turning her bright designer fight gear completely crimson. Most fighters, especially those who rely entirely on their looks to make a living, would have immediately looked for a way out. They would have told the referee they couldn't see, taken the respectable loss, and gone back to taking photos by the pool. But not the Chi-Town princess. Pearl spat a mouthful of blood onto the canvas, bit down on her mouthpiece with terrifying resolve, and bit directly into the chaos. She marched forward blindly, swinging wild, desperate, heavy hooks, trying to take Britton Hart's head clean off her shoulders. The final bell eventually rang, and both women stood dead in the center of the ring, completely covered in each other's blood, their faces swollen, bruised, and gashed beyond any immediate recognition. Britton Hart was awarded the unanimous decision victory on the scorecards.
All in favor of your winner by unanimous decision, Britton! 6-0!
But on that night, Pearl Gonzalez won something infinitely far more valuable than a plastic championship belt. She completely, permanently shattered the illusion. She proved to the entire combat sports world, and to every single hater online, that she was not a bimbo. She was not a gimmick. She was a legitimate, horrifyingly tough, iron-jawed fighter who was entirely willing to sacrifice her face, her perfect body, and her vanity for the absolute, pure love of combat. She walked out of that ring a certified warrior, having earned the ultimate respect of the very people who had spent years mocking her. Following her legendary bare knuckle stint, she transitioned back to traditional professional boxing with gloves, fighting under Jorge Masvidal's game-bred boxing banner. She took on gritty veterans like Gina Mazzani, showcasing incredibly sharp boxing technique and outclassing her opponent over 6 rounds. She continued to take incredibly tough fights against gritty veterans, completely unfazed by the damage. But outside the cage and the ring, Pearl Gonzalez had already won the ultimate war of life. She had completely mastered the algorithm of modern sports entertainment. She proved that you do not have to choose between being beautiful and being violent. You can be the girl sitting front row at a fashion show, wearing thousands of dollars in designer clothes. And you can also be the girl who spits teeth onto a canvas and throws bare knuckle right hands until her knuckles swell to the size of golf balls. Pearl Gonzalez is the absolute ultimate paradox of modern combat sports. She is a woman who can post a perfectly lit, highly glamorous bikini bikini photo to millions of adoring, drooling fans on a Tuesday afternoon, and then step directly into a squared circle on a Saturday night to trade bare knuckle left hooks until the canvas is stained completely red. She forced the world to look at her, she weaponized their judgment and their lust, and then she battered them into sheer, undeniable respect. She is the living, breathing proof that the most dangerous, lethal predators on the planet don't always look the part. Sometimes, the prettiest face in the entire room hides the most absolute, unhinged, and terrifying violence imaginable.